So what's the deal with tinctures anyway? I mean, do we really need to make a tincture out of an herb? Can't we just make a tea out of it? Just pour boiling water over the herb or buy encapsulated herbs in the health food aisle at the grocery store? I mean, why do we make them? And if we do, what's the difference between a percolation versus a maceration tincture and does it really matter? Now, these are the kinds of questions I love to answer because everybody has questions like these about herbalism and about herbs. In fact, it's why I created the Introduction to Herbalism for Professionals course, the 12-week online course where we answer hundreds, if not thousands, of questions like these in ways that not only give you the answers, but let you experience the answers by sending you herbs and materials to make your own percolation tinctures, for instance. But let's go ahead and talk about tinctures for a minute here, about why we make tinctures and how we make tinctures. A tincture is basically an extract where we can take an herb or part of that herb and we can extract most or even all of the constituents out into a solvent. This solvent is a lot of times called a menstruum. That's an older word used for the same thing, but a solvent allows us to extract all of those constituents out. And the solvent that we most commonly use for that is alcohol, or better said, a mixture of alcohol and water, or a hydroethanolic extract. So the next question we might ask ourselves is, what is the best method then to get all of these compounds or these constituents of the plant into my solvent? Right, and so there are a couple of preferred methods for that, not going into things like multifractional extracts, but just tinctures. We usually find ourselves using either what's called a maceration tincture or a percolation tincture. There's a fairly long-standing debate about which is better, maceration or percolation, but the truth of the matter is that both are good for different situations. Both have their advantages and their disadvantages, and it's largely a matter of style or preference too as to what you like to use. For example, if you wish to tincture, say, a fresh plant, or maybe at least close to fresh. Maybe let's say you pick the leaves of a plant and let them wilt for 24 hours to evaporate a lot of that water content and then put them into a jar, or put them just directly into a jar from the plant, literally in the field, and then pour whatever your alcohol water mix is, maybe let's just say vodka, and want to pour them together and let them sit. That's going to be by far your best and most efficient way to work with a fresh plant. So you take a mason jar or some kind of canning jar, work really well for this. You're going to fill up a certain amount with your fresh plant, and then you're going to fill up a certain amount with alcohol. At that point, then, you'll take that maceration tincture, that jar with alcohol and fresh plant leaf in it, and you'll let it sit for a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, or even longer. You could let it sit for several months if you want, shaking it up a few times a day if possible, getting a lot of agitation in there. So you're moving that solvent across the herb, across the plant itself, and you're pulling out those constituents into the alcohol from the herb. Over time, with maceration or letting it sit in a wet environment like that, the combination of those two things allow us to be able to extract a large amount of constituents from a fresh plant. Of course, you can do a maceration tincture as well with dried plant material, whether it's ground or whether it's cut and sifted or whatever size it is. And you can do the same thing. You can let it sit and soak, and then you can shake it up, and you can, and at some point when you're ready, you can strain that off. And you can strain that by hand, with cheesecloth, or you can let it sit over cheesecloth in a strainer and let it drip, and then squeeze it. Or you can put it into an actual press, a tincture press, that gets you a lot of pressure on there, which you can either buy a tincture press or you can make one. A percolation tincture, on the other hand, is something that we normally only do with dried herb, and we have to grind it to a certain consistency. It in my experience, doesn't want to be too fine, but it doesn't want to be too coarse either. There's sort of a fine line between having it coarse enough to have alcohol flow through a percolation, just like the concept of a coffee percolator almost, except we generally don't do it with heat like we do with coffee. But the same idea of percolating alcohol and using gravity through that coarsely ground or medium grind of herb all the way down and dripping that out, the product of that out, and controlling that drip rate. So this requires the use of something like a funnel, and if we want to control the drip rate of that alcohol, then we need something on the end of it to control the drip. Now, there's a lot of things that we can do for this. We can manufacture our own in just kind of a home do-it-yourself environment where we cut the bottom off of a bottle that's shaped like a funnel, and then we can use the lid of that bottle as our flow controller. Now, I actually really like this method using the bottle because it's so easy to do. Anybody can do it from home, and it's actually surprisingly very effective to use that lid as a flow controller. You can go one step further and you can use a chemistry stopcock to be able to control the flow. You can also move from the bottle into a more professional rig setup, like using a dropping funnel. And that's what we use in our apothecary mostly, is dropping funnels. This is, of course, more GMP compliant than using a homemade bottle, which is not GMP compliant at all. But beyond that, just even for making home tinctures, I happen to like the way the dropping funnel works. And even though it's more of a vertical drop and less of a funnel as such, it works very effectively. I like it a lot, and we can use 500 milliliter or 1,000 milliliter generally sizes. They allow us to get quite a bit of herb out in a very specific way and really control that drip rate as well. Now, as I mentioned, whether maceration or percolation tincture is largely a matter of personal preference. For me, personally, I prefer percolation tincture for dried herb, and I, of course, use maceration tincture for fresh herb. The reason I prefer percolation tincture for dried herb is that, number one, it is more efficient. I can get more tincture more quickly. As you can see, we have a lot of tincture back here, and there's sometimes where we need a lot of tincture for orders, and we can get 24 or 48 hours turnaround on 1,000 or more milliliters of tincture, and it's really good quality. I would say that's the second reason, is that to me, percolation tinctures on dried herb are just more active. I don't know how else to describe them. I always just say they're hotter, not in a spicy or a heat sort of way, but they're just more active. I find that they work better on a medicinal level. Now, that may not jive with your opinion at all on this and your experience, and that's great. That's fine. In fact, if you're seeing this on YouTube, feel free to comment below as to what your favorite is, percolation or maceration. What I would suggest, though, is if you don't have any experience with one or the other, try them both out. Try them both out even with the same herb, maybe the same batch of the same dried herb, for instance, and compare side by side, and you'll see there's definitely a difference. They're not exactly the same. Additionally, if you like this kind of information, then check out the link either below in YouTube or wherever you'll see this posted in social media for our Introduction to Herbal Medicine for Professionals link, 12-week online course, where we send you not just the herbs, but also a percolation funnel and a lot of other materials so that we can make medicine in a very interactive way. You can do it at home, we can do it live, and you get to see the whole thing. And that's just a small fraction. That's about 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks out of the 12-week online course, where we go over everything from body systems and pathophysiology-based Western herbalism to materia medica of over 70 herbs, to herbal first aid, and even post-disaster herbalism, just a ton of information. So check out the links, and I hope to see you there, and we will get a lot more into this percolation tincture stuff, along with even delve a little bit into multifractional and some other medicine making stuff, along with all the other information that we will be sharing with you during that 12-week online course. Bye.